Hello, everyone. My name is Tova Harris, and today I am going over a professional development session on the post-heroic perspective of leadership within public library makerspaces. As a quick side note, something I saw and really loved in other folks' professional development sessions so far was a little introduction slide. So here it goes. I'm Tova. I use she, they pronouns. I work at Longwood Public Library out in Suffolk County, in or on Long Island, depending on where in New York you're saying it from. I am lucky enough to have the awesome position of Makerspace Librarian Trainee within Longwood's growing Makerspace, and I've worked within public library makerspaces since December of 2022. I currently write a column within Nyla's Voice called A Tale of Two Makerspaces, and each article is on the topic of the month facing public library makerspaces, so please feel free to read my work if you'd like to learn more about them, and if makerspaces might be something you'd like to try out in your librarian careers. Now, back to the topic at hand. Today's agenda includes the following slides and corresponding topics. What exactly is a makerspace? What are the current barriers in public library makerspaces? What is the history of leadership and scholarship in makerspaces, and how does the post-heroic leadership model fit into this history? What does the post-heroic leadership model look like in public library makerspaces? And finally, what are some post-heroic tools you can use in your respective makerspace? Now, for some basic foundational concepts on what is a public library makerspace. If I were to try to sum up public library makerspaces in one sentence, I would say that they are designated spaces within a library that are craft or maker-oriented, fueled by interest-driven and intentional learning motives and outcomes. While other making spaces, commonly referred to as fab labs, tech shops, or hacker spaces, may have more higher-end manufacturing or engineering equipment, the average public library makerspace holds what are known as Cricut machines, sewing machines, 3D printers, and free 3D modeling software access. However, like any other part of a public library, the resources and services a makerspace offers will definitely reflect the budget or allocated funds a library has to give to it. Depending on the public library's makerspace staffing and overall makerspace layout and budget, a public library makerspace can often offer open hours for the community as well as monthly programming. And as a quick reference, here's an example of a beautifully designed public library makerspace located in Crane, Massachusetts, known as the Cranium Makerspace. So now that we have a better sense of what a public library makerspace is, let's discover what are some current barriers. Now, to give a very short answer to the question of barriers in public library makerspaces, it would also be the novelty of their existence. Public libraries out on Long Island are just starting to open up public library makerspaces, and each respective library is, quote unquote, figuring it out as they go. While there is formal practitioners' research and manuals on important topics of makerspaces, the individualized experience of each library in every stage of a makerspace establishing life cycle means that most policies, procedures, and programming are drafted and decided in real time. Since makerspaces often have many different types of equipment and services, library staff that decide to work within them must take the time and care to learn the details of their makerspace and often time-consuming endeavor. A public library can even open a makerspace without the makerspace having its own official department, and the overall stress and demands on makerspace staff can lead to burnout. So what types of leadership models have been used in corporate and nonprofit work as it relates to libraries? So what are the work leadership models that have framed America's work culture for decades upon decades? It begins with the trait theory of leadership, which dates back to the mid-1800s via Thomas Carlyle's Great Man Theory of 1840. Like much hereditary-based assumptions of the time via research, excellent leadership was also posited to be based off of the innate traits of a man of great breeding and intellect possessed. Moving away from trait theory in the 1940s and 1950s, a number of research findings, the managerial grid, situational leadership, and dimensions of leadership behavior shifted the working model of leadership to that of an acquisition of skills and knowledge to quote unquote do the job. Fast forwarding to the 1960s, psychologist Fred Fiedler introduced the world to the contingency theory of leadership, whereby true leadership was exemplified by a person who could recognize the demands of a situation and adjust their leadership style accordingly. Since the 1990s, new leadership theories have taken over the working landscape due to their basic concepts of the complex interactions between leaders and staff, those in power and their respective employees. And it's mostly guided by a drive towards trust and shared decision-making practices. And so we finally meet the most important question: what is post-heroic leadership, and what are its overall benefits? To best describe post-heroic leadership, a form of new leadership, I can try to explain its fundamental values, which includes an emphasis on a collective, interactive learning process between a leader and their employees. Research by J.K. Fletcher views the significance of the post-heroic leadership model as a conscious shift from non-gendered masculine logic of effectiveness via individualism and control to a more feminine logic of effectiveness that is grounded in the active growth of all involved. While still somewhat controversial in analysis, the post-heroic leadership model serves as a reference to a more collaborative, relationship-oriented, utilitarianistic model of ethical leadership. And so, what does a post-heroic leadership model look like in a public library makerspace? Some major examples of post-heroic leadership include some intuitively basic practices: weekly Makerspace staff check-ins, a general breakdown of Makerspace tasks and duties that are rotating or switching if needed, which also reduces potential burnout of any one Makerspace employee, and most significantly, in my opinion, designated training or learning times for Makerspace staff to both understand and gain confidence and proficiency in every Makerspace service or activity. While these three suggestions may seem extremely obvious in nature to many, most public library makerspaces do not include such practices due to lack of time and/or staffing. How can you introduce post-heroic leadership tools to your public library makerspaces? Well, Step 1, schedule designated time with your library director that includes a formal written proposal on the post-heroic leadership model and its potential benefits on your public library makerspace. Next, meet with library makerspace staff and equally present the topic and model and its benefits. Step 3 is creating and implementing the makerspace task delineations and its respected rotating schedule, scheduling training times and weekly check-ins. And lastly, at the end of the quote-unquote test run of this model, meet with your makerspace staff to get feedback and guidance on next steps. If you have any questions on this framework, please do not hesitate to email me at tovahar@buffalo.edu. And thank you so much for your time.